the amount of strength that he needs is really impressive. Okay, in this video, we're going to be reviewing the strength conditioning methods of Gennady Golovkin, aka Triple G. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to be showing you how Golovkin produces so much power in his punches. So we're starting off with some core work. It's supposed to target rotation because it's done in a sit-up position and done quite close to the chest with relatively light weight. It's not really isolating the obliques as well as what I'd like to see. Dominantly going to be targeting the abs and targeting that trunk flexion. But it's good in a way because it's killing two birds with one stone. And when you're actually in the boxing ring, you're not going to be isolating the obliques. So there's going to be some like abdominal recruitment as well going on at the same time as you're going rotating. There's exercises that we do, such as like pull-off press, doing cable rotations to isolate the obliques, but there's exercises that include all the core, emphasis going on the obliques as well. But what I would say is to try and increase the intensity of this and not be so predominant in that trunk flexion. So doing stuff like kettlebell drags, these Russian twists, we're doing it with a kettlebell, a heavy kettlebell, rotating all the way over, releasing, picking back up, and the pickup of the kettlebell will actually increase the obliques as you're dragging it back across whilst being in a sit-up position. We can do this with banded rotations in a supine position, really working on that eccentric because there's not a large amount of eccentric load going on in these Russian twists here. Can do this on glute ham raise as well to increase the intensity and the demand. And also you can do a pull-off press, do it chaotic as well. Doing it with chaotic, increase that oblique activation through proprioception. It's a great exercise to use with boxers, and you do that for around about 20 seconds. The boxer's ability to maintain that pull-off position whilst going under variable load. Okay, so moving on to Golovkin's core training, quite extreme. He'll do hundreds, if not thousands of sit-up variations. And there's positives and there's negatives to this. In our study, Wilson et al. 2020, if you want to go and look at it, biggest physical contributors towards punching force. What we found is that the lean mass of the trunk is the biggest contributor to estimated punching force. So the more core mass that you have when you weigh in, the more likely you're going to punch hard. And we're talking about one of the generation's pound for pound biggest punches, quite big around the trunk, pretty strong in his core. But also this can help contribute to reduction of lower back injuries. We wouldn't do it in this kind of way in terms of like hundreds and thousands of sit-ups, because as you can see there, there's a lot of crunching activities, not a lot of spinal control. And we look to try and resist kind of movements in the spine to create strength and stability. Target through our 4 pillars of core training: anti-extension, anti-lateral flexion, anti-rotation, hip flexion with neutral spine. Across these 4 pillars, we also periodize our approach. We look to be stable at the start, so this is through kind of isometric actions, being able to control and resist movements in them different movement planes. And then we move on to strength, which is challenging our stability through a range of motion. And then we look to power, so we do like we've targeted the 4 different pillars with med ball throws, with banded rotations and stuff like that. We know with Golovkin that he does this kind of sit-up routine all the way through the camp. It's very limited in its intensity, very limited in its eccentric control. You know, the variability as well and transfer to boxing is quite limited as well. So try and increase your strength endurance, do something like core circuits at the end, target the 4 pillars and making sure that it's got a periodized approach going towards your fight. So in this clip, Abel Sanchez is going to be explaining what Golovkin's core routine actually is in terms of volume and frequency.
Gennady does sit-ups 3 times a day after he runs. Does about 12 to 1500 after, or right after he stretches, he'll do another 1000 to 1200, and then after he trains, he'll do 1200 again. So if you think about it, in 30 days, he's probably done 90,000 sit-ups.
90,000 sit-ups within a month. Quite excessive. Anything that's good for you, even if it's squats, deadlifts, jumps, there's a level of kind of what is optimum and what is too much. For us, like what is the ideal volume? We target 4 to 5 different exercises in each strength session. We'll do a core circuit once or twice a week, so make sure that we're hitting the core 4 times in a week. We would do anywhere between 120 and 150 reps in total, equates 6 to 10 reps on each exercise. Obviously each side, if you're doing stuff that's unilateral. Yeah, it all depends on the phase of camp that you're in as well. As we get closer towards fight, we'll do more kind of high intensity work where we're doing high effort isometrics, 100% isometrics. We'll be doing like rotational throws, so then the volume comes down quite a lot. 3,000 sit-ups a day is very excessive. Okay, so we've got the famous Golovkin kettlebell turnovers. Really impressive. I'd like to know what weight that is. I'd say that that's around about 25 minimum, maybe 35 kilo kettlebell. And that's Teofimo Lopez giving it a go. And then skipping to the lighter. You don't want to be just going too heavy too soon. I'd say with this, like, even though it is impressive and it can really transfer to Golovkin as he turns over on the shots, and that's where he generates his power. Obviously, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, the science behind why Golovkin generates so much power. His ability to turn over and hit you on the knuckle and the part of the head that he hits you on as well. Like so many knockouts where you're hitting right on the temple, on the forehead. It's where boxers aren't really conditioned to be taking punches. So yeah, in being able to turn it over, that's really good. If he's really looking to isolate the forearms and grip strength, he'd want to do it a little bit lighter so it's more controlled. So you can see in his posture, he's actually turning a lot of his body into it. He's having to really dig down. He's trying to turn his shoulders in, especially if he starts going heavier as well, to try and turn that over. And as well, it's very concentric based, whereas like a lot of strength comes from the eccentric. So as soon as he turns that over there and he gets to the midpoint, he kind of loses that control. So he doesn't get the eccentric portion. So there's a few different exercises that you can do, just like lighter dumbbell turnovers, so getting on a table, an old school adjustable dumbbell, so you can bias the weight on one side, and just doing dumbbell turnovers and going for around about 6 to 8 repetitions on each side and building up them foundations for that movement. Then you can increase the intensity by doing eccentrics. Either way, can get it to the center, heavy load it, try and control it all the way down. Go for about 5 or 6 repetitions on this. And then you could go for banded turnovers as well. So getting a band around squat rack, grabbing a fist, turning over your knuckle. Either way, not only is this hard on the concentric, but also control it back on the eccentric as well. And you really start feeling forearm muscles in this. Great way to build up forearm strength, grip strength, and also provide some support to the hands and wrists.
In my system, in my way of training guys, I want them tired before they start sparring. I want them tired before they do the mitts. I want them tired before they do the bag. They do 10 minutes of rope. They do 15, 20 minutes of stretching, as you saw them do. Basically
wanting his fighters to be fatigued going into training. You know, who am I to criticize his training methods? Based on science and based on kind of my opinion around training, I wouldn't suggest to do this. I've worked for his fighters for so many years, but if I were going to advise somebody, I wouldn't do this, and there are a few reasons why. The first one is that boxing training is the most important part of a training camp. You're wanting to maximize the intensity, you're wanting to maximize the speed, the timing, the performance, the concentration during that session. The last thing that you want to do is fatigue an athlete and sub-optimize the performance in essentially the most important part of camp, especially sparring. There would be some sort of psychological demands. I won't say physiological demands. I think that it makes it harder. I don't think that you get any fitness adaptations from it. Obviously, perceptually, it gets a lot harder. And the psychological and the perceptual kind of fatigue can have a positive impact in terms of boxing. This is maybe why Abel Sanchez does this, but from a physiological point of view, I look to try and limit fatigue around sessions, especially around sparring. So this brings us on to like a topic conversation that I get asked quite a lot, is where would you put strength and conditioning, high intensity conditioning around boxing? Would you do this in the morning and do boxing in the afternoon, or would you do boxing in the morning and then your strength and conditioning in the afternoon? Well, it always depends on coach and the gym availability. But in a perfect setting, I'd always say boxing comes first, so they're fresh and ready for it. That allows us to maximize the strength conditioning session and the high intensity conditioning, because even though they're fatigued, we don't have to limit the amount of reps, the amount of intensity that we can go to, because we don't have to think that they've got to recover 2-3 hours later, they're going into the boxing session. Prioritize the boxing, try and be as fresh as possible for boxing, as you can. Shoulder endurance exercises here. We've got some rolls, we've got some reverse flies, we've got some overhead pressing. I think it's on about 1 or 2 kilo dumbbells here. I don't know what this guy's doing. It just looks like it's in the nightclub there. For the purpose of this video, I've shortened this down, but it's around about 5 or 7 minutes he does this for. I get a lot of questions about this, about shoulder, how to improve shoulder endurance. Obviously, throwing thousands of punches, being in this guard a lot. You know, first kind of muscle to kind of start being fatigued is the shoulders. There's a few different things that I'd say around that. Is not to just go and start doing hundreds, if not thousands of reps, improving mobility and improving posterior shoulder strength. The reason why this is fatiguing the anterior shoulder is probably because it's quite dominant. Strengthen up the posterior shoulder muscles and loosen off the shoulder so that it reduces its anterior dominance. You're probably going to reduce that fatigue. Shoulder exercises that we use is a half kneeling dumbbell shoulder press. It's a simple exercise that you can use with limited equipment and just look to try and overload that shoulder and overhead strength. And then if you're looking to actually try and improve like strength endurance of the shoulders with intensity, there's a few different ways. You've got Lewin raises where we're looking to try and improve that overhead range, going from a lateral raise, going all the way up overhead and then coming back down. This is a real burner for the shoulders. You can perform 10 to 12 reps on this. We've got the shoulder burner going from a lateral raise to the front raise and then going overhead. 10 to 12 reps on this and you should feel the burn. So using the Sarga Fitness BFR cuffs, alternate presses overhead, and going through the protocol, 30 reps, 15 reps, 15 reps, and finishing off with a max out effort. Doing this on relatively lower loads, but with the BFR cuffs, create more fatiguing demands and will improve like kind of strength endurance as well. It's probably why he's got such a strong chin, never been down in his career. Yeah, but these are his neck training and get a lot of questions about neck bridges. So this one that he's doing here where he's just rocking from side to side in neck bridge, the amount of strength that he needs is really impressive. Safe for an athlete to do this? Probably not. High compressions forces going through the neck and going through the spine. His posture isn't great, especially like going from side to side there, increasing that demand laterally. I wouldn't advise to do this. A lot of our neck work is done banded, isometrics, and being able to control and stay in that neutral position, but then challenging the demands either laterally, prone, or supine. But also starting with high volume, so going for like 20 to 40 second holds to start off with, shortening the rep duration, but increasing the intensity. So we'd probably go for volume with the RPE, so rate of perceived exertion of 3 or 4 out of 10 for over them 20 to 40 seconds. And then we'd go to a 7 or 8 out of 10 over 10 seconds. And then we'd go for about a 9 out of 10 over like a period of 3 to 5 seconds where you're getting a partner to pull on a band. And you've got to be able to control that position. And that's a safe way in performing neck training, especially high force neck training. What you don't want to do is just start trying to do these bridges. This is the quickest way to start getting injured. Mike Tyson actually said about how the neck bridges actually caused him a lot of injuries later on in life. You know, Golovkin might feel that it's benefiting him now, but it's like the injuries that you pick up from doing thousands of reps for many, many years of doing that kind of activity is going to start hurting down the line. Now, if you are adamant at doing some sort of neck bridges or haven't got access to bands or partner to be able to create that resistance, doing something like this, like against the ropes, like I'd say that that's a safer way of doing like neck bridges. What I would say is just doing an isometric hold instead of doing the back and forth technique there. I'd say just do an isometric hold, put your body weight in, hold it for about 30 to 40 seconds on there. And that's an easy way to build up your neck strength whilst in the boxing gym. Okay, so we've got some long steady state running here. If you're a keen follower of Boxing Science, you know that we look to replicate the high intensity demands of boxing, working in the red zone, repeated high intensity actions, use stuff like red zone running and 30-second max out sprints instead of doing like long steady state runs. But I'm not going to go too much into that during this clip here. What I'd like to talk about more is the location where he's training. It's well documented for many, many years that Golovkin situated his training at Big Bear, California at the Summit Gym. And this is at high altitude. So this is around about 16% oxygen. When we use a Power Breathe Altitude Systems tent, we set our tent at around about 14 to 16% oxygen. This really limits intensity and really promotes some fitness adaptations. So there's some mixed research around altitude training, whether it increases red blood cells or increases VO2 max. You know, there's conflicting studies, and the most effective way in using altitude training is to live high and train low. So you live at high altitude and basically camp at high altitude, but you do most of your training at sea level. Most of this training that Golovkin does is at high altitude, so this will limit the amount of intensity that you can produce. And the intensity is what drives physiological adaptations, whether that's doing the red zone runs, whether it's doing 30-second max out sprints, doing 12 seconds on, 48 off, doing repeated sprints. We're always looking to produce the highest speed or highest power output possible, because that's what's going to increase the physiological adaptations. Now, the reason why we use the altitude tent is to try and reduce the intensity as we get to more intense parts of training camp. So making sure that our athlete is still targeting physical adaptations, but at reduced intensity, so it's not taking too much out of them. So the session becomes more efficient. But we only use this at certain times in training camp. We've already overloaded them with the intense work at the start of camp, and then we'll use altitude training in a constructive way towards the end of camp. The altitude training camps have been successful in terms of like psychological and perceptual benefits, like I've mentioned previously. If you're looking to improve physiologically, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and I'll be looking to do hot conditions instead of just going at high altitude, because that will promote more physical adaptations, and maybe that's another video altogether. Okay, so we've got some dumbbell shadow boxing. Pretty old school method, something that we support at Boxing Science. We've done a full video on this. What I would say about this is very upper arm dominant and very repetition based, rather than kind of working through kind of speed and technique of the punches. Reason why we'd say dumbbell shadow box is to just focus on kind of working through that end range, making sure you're getting the right technique, rather than doing like shadow boxing and just kind of flicking out the arms. Golovkin here is looking like he's just doing it as a kind of shoulder, like strength endurance exercise. So yeah, use shadow boxing, treat it just like normal shadow boxing. Except from like kind of his core training and his trunk strength doesn't really replicate like what it takes to increase punch power. So we'd normally say to improve rotational force and strength, improve reactive strength, be able to increase low body rate of force development. Not really seeing Golovkin do heavy squats or deadlifts or doing some heavy loaded jumps, which we'd see to optimize momentum, which correlates into increasing the punch. Why does Golovkin punch so hard? A lot is due to genetics, but a lot is to do with his technique and his timing. And we've actually covered like an article in the past about this, and timing of his shots and his impressive footwork, that's always punching within range. And this goes towards what we call the length tension relationship. So length tension relationship is the length of the muscle to how much tension that you can create at that length. So when the muscle's too short or too long, the force is suboptimal. But at the middle point, it's a little bit like Goldilocks and the three bears. Basically, they increase and the optimal force is produced. And Golovkin, because of his footwork, his speed and his timing, doesn't waste anything. So his bent arm shots are always thrown within range, and this is the reason why he punches so hard. Now, obviously, you try and improve this in the boxing gym and working on your footwork and your decision making, but on a physiological standpoint, you can improve this through a range of different methods. Partial range lifts, accommodating resistance, and also working isometrics and end range isometrics. And the goal is to try and increase the amount of range that you have that optimum force for, and also increasing the amount of force that you can produce at the end range of the punch. So there are a few different methods that you can use. There's a few things that, you know, I'd probably change if I was his strength and conditioning coach, but you know, it's worked for him over many, many years. There's some positives in there, and also there's a few alternatives that you can take into your training. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if you're not a follower of Boxing Science yet, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content.